Recently, I've been using this channel to show some OpenStreetMap editing, especially along the Chinese border. So I wanted to share what it turned out to be one of the most interesting updates in that space that I've seen in a long time. And this is going to be a little bit controversial for some people, but I want to kind of show how I went from this news story to looking up what exists on OpenStreetMap and then how that data got there. So I saw a story on Twitter which led me to this New York Times article, which is talking about a village that China built in disputed territory along the China-Bhutan border. And they have some pictures of what it looked like about a year ago and very recently from October, it says. And there's some details there. I clicked on some more links and ended up finding this article, which has a few more satellite pictures. And that's useful for me because I want to get more detail about where this actually is. So I might be able to find it on the map and by looking at the satellite pictures that are built into the OpenStreetMap editor if there's no information there. And this is a little tricky because one, they're showing it at a 3D angle with north in this direction. Two, I don't know how recently the satellite imagery was updated in OpenStreetMap editor Maxar that's available. So it's entirely possible that I'm not going to see anything there at this point, but I do want to get an idea of the location. So there are two things that I found which are interesting. One, they label this as Dak Lam, and they label somewhere else they talk about the river specifically that this is alongside. Like if you notice the original image is here in this article, you'll see it's right by the river. So if I find that specific river, then go up and down in this area, I should be able to find it. So Dak Lam is mapped here on OpenStreetMap. It's sort of an intersection between India, Bangladesh is nestled in here, Bhutan, and then the Chinese border. And there's a lot of careful labeling by OpenStreetMap editors. If there's a disputed border or disputed region, it's going to be completely surrounded by this purple national border area and then tagged as disputed. And then there's various tags to know which country has sort of like local control. Like if you were there, who would be running the government? And in this case, it is a village that was built by China and is communicating with China in that regard. So I'm not really interested in editing the border or anything like that. I'm mostly interested in finding what exists at this place. So it's this particularly shaped area here. And I went searching for a while before I ended up finding a source that this is the Torsa River and this was the correct place to look. And long story short, there is the village there already. Let's go and look at the satellite map. So as I've discussed before, there's in the editor, there are Bing maps, which are generally older. And so if I zoom in on this area, you'll see it's just all green on Bing maps. And then the Maxar imagery, which looks a lot like the New York Times picture from about a year ago, maybe a little bit earlier than that. So that's a hint of when the Maxar imagery might come from. Let me check if Esri has anything. It's about the same. Cool. So there are a couple things that I noticed about this. Let's start with clicking on the node that represents the village. It says Pangda, which matches we saw on the map here for the name of the village. And some information, 2020, October 1st, 180 people. There's a link to the Chinese language Wikipedia. And at the bottom of this tab, you'll see View on OpenStreetMap. Oh. Well, when I looked at this previously, there was a chain of information which showed when was this point first created and which users were involved in creating and updating it. So something that was interesting is the edits started about 2 weeks ago, which is before either of these two articles appeared in the English language press, which makes sense. I guess the articles could have appeared earlier in Bhutan, China, India. But it's interesting from the timeline that the village was added fairly recently. Another thing that I noticed, which started to surprise me, is that they evolved the building outlines here, including for places that aren't on the Maxar imagery. And they're very precise and they match the New York Times imagery. So this makes me believe that whoever drew these had more access to other more recent satellite imagery so they could trace things correctly. And then the final thing that I'll point out about this is that they've labeled this building as a preschool, and further down here they've labeled one of these buildings as a like guard station, like where is it? Maybe it's this one. Yeah, that's a police station. So even though that building doesn't exist on this map yet, so whoever was editing this had access to more specific on the ground information about what's built there. And I'm grateful that we have accurate information about this territory and that people are editing these more often. But it is a little unusual that, given how recently this village was built and constructed, that someone with access to this information has come in and added it to OpenStreetMap. So let me retry this one here. Cool. So when I click on that, go here. When I click on this link, View on OpenStreetMap, at the bottom of the left tab, it's going to show me the current version and the current tags. And then I can click View History, and it'll show me the first, this was first created 12 days ago. And one thing that I'll also add about this is someone could have, there could have been a point here earlier that was deleted and then this point was added in. I don't think that's the case here, but in case you're wondering, is it possible that data existed here earlier than 12 days ago? It's totally possible. But this shows the history. There are some minor edits. And one of the more common edits to this, there are two people who've edited it. This user and NM$L. And when I looked at this earlier, I was a little bit taken aback. Usually a user doesn't have very much information on their profile. And for this user, they've very clearly, well, it's useful. They're telling information about what they're working on, what areas they're interested in. They specifically mentioned the South China Sea and the lack of OpenStreetMap China data, which is very true. They mentioned they're going to use Rapid, the Facebook AI tool, to help with editing. One thing they'll point out, though, is Rapid needs satellite imagery to work, so I don't think that Rapid was used in this particular case. And then there's a kind of a mission statement and the dashed line to include the South China Sea and China territory. So I thought this was interesting to find this person is creating, labeling helping create the village and labeling particular buildings on this map, specifically on OpenStreetMap. What I got thinking about, though, was I actually don't know a lot about the Bhutan border. I haven't done very much editing, and I haven't done any editing at all in that particular area of Daklam before. And so it made me think about there's a nearby area on the China-India border where I had done editing about 4 months ago. And I remembered it specifically because if you look on the editor, you can actually see these Chinese characters, which were uh, basically drawn or formed with the earthworks here. So I don't know exactly what that is, but someone's gone through and labeled this as a military area, and I had come through specifically to add this paved switchback because it just seems like a lot of work, right? And it's very recent, the switchback that goes up to the top of this area here. They've labeled this as a residential area. Um, in any case, one thing I noticed about the switchback is that someone had added in the name of the road, this particular road on the China-India border, very remote location. And they've also added the pinyin uh, transliteration of it, which is helpful for me. And then again, I go to the bottom of the left tab and click View on OpenStreetMap. And, that English name was added 11 days ago. And if I click View History, all the way at the bottom, you'll see I edited it 6 months ago, actually. So I just added it as a service road. And then 2 months ago, NM$L, that's the same person I showed you their profile earlier, added the Chinese name. I'll zoom out so you can see where this is. This is on the China-India border. So right up by Kashmir. So I thought it was interesting that this user is very active in both of these locations, and I guess I'm also very active along the border. So, I mean, I don't have any complaints with someone adding accurate information because, like, as we saw with the village, I think this is very accurate. It's very helpful, and it tells us a lot about where things are in this village that I could never have gotten that much information. And I think we're all motivated to add, our own countries, um, update our own country's maps and add more information where we have it. I think though it got me thinking more about the nature of OpenStreetMap. If there was more organized, like in some sense nationalist views in terms of what people are editing, there's been a really good job done by OpenStreetMap editors in active conflict zones. I'm thinking of like Crimea or more recently the Azerbaijan-Armenia border to accurately reflect local control and to accurately reflect local names and to accurately, or to be patient. I remember during the Crimea situation, there was a kind of a call to stop editing information in Crimea until there was like a more solid like resolution or kind of a more stable situation. So definitely there's a lot of people who know more about this in the OpenStreetMap world in terms of what people are adding and how people are dealing with these disputed territories. And all I can say for now is that it's good that we have this information. I definitely couldn't really come anywhere close to adding this information about this particular village, so I'm glad that it's here. And I think it's also interesting that, if you explore around, uh, you'll see some other areas that have been kind of uh, cleared away more recently. Um, or maybe that's just like an artifact of how the river is. Difficult to say. But definitely an area to keep an eye on if you're a foreign relations person. But yeah, thanks for checking out the OpenStreetMap data.